no application of the Mosaic turned kinship, turned vassal covenant remains. The feast, the Sabbath, the civil laws, ceremonial laws, they're all done away with. We don't have to follow the law to love your neighbor as yourself, as said in the old 10 Commandments. And that rolls right into number 10. The law of the new covenant is love one another as I have loved you. Which, this is a really good book and will explain all of that.
So you can see why that guy liked it.
To the listener of the podcast, I'm talking about the book called The One Commandment.
Available on Amazon.
Available on Amazon.
Written by Maxine Armstrong.
Yeah. It's her first book. She said prophetically.
Yeah, right. In parentheses.
Don't wait for me, go ahead.
Okay. What was I going to say?
Something about Peter and the Pentecost.
Right. So, as we read through Acts, we see a lot of learning curves to learn point 9, that no application of the Mosaic remains. The feast, the Sabbath, the civil laws, the ceremonial laws, the moral laws. Peter's already been a Christian. The Holy Spirit has already come. It's been happening for a couple years at this point, and he's praying on the roof, and he has this vision of reptiles in a sheet, and the voice says, "Arise, Peter, kill and eat." And he's like, "Nope, I haven't ever broken the law." His mind is still in the law, and it's already been a couple years now, and it happens again, and it happens again. And then some people from Cornelius's, the centurion, who's a Roman, he's a Gentile, they knock on the door and they say, "Would you please come to our house and tell us about this Jesus?" And he's like, "Oh, gosh, that vision was telling me that not to show any partiality." So they were in a transitional period. The Acts is them trying to figure this whole new thing out.
Right.
They didn't know all the laws. They didn't figure it out instantaneously. They were trying to put those pieces together. And so they were in that was one indication of the transition. Another one was when Peter again went to meet up with Paul, and he started eating with the Jews who had come, and Paul was very frustrated with Peter at that point. It's like, "Why are you a Jew and asking the people to live like a Jew? You know we couldn't follow it. We couldn't follow these ceremonial laws. Why are you pretending that what is the thing?" And so Paul kind of got very indignant because Peter, by his actions, was indicating that people ought to follow an old law that was going away and that they don't follow anymore. Again, the question came up about circumcision, which was again a law, but it was a really good question because Moses was given the covenant of circumcision, and that was before the law. So do we continue to circumcise because Moses was before the law, and then there was the whole Council of Jerusalem, which is in Acts 17, that they go back and forth, and based on the evidence of God moving in the Gentiles and them not being circumcised based on what God was doing in the world, they decided no, because the Holy Spirit is moving in them and they haven't followed the law of circumcision. So there were lots of transitions like that. There's also a group of people who were baptized into the baptism of John but had never heard the Holy Spirit, but they were trying to live by the new covenant. And so there's a lot of people in Acts that are still trying to put those things together. Ananias and Sapphira is always the big, well, what about them in the New Testament? But it was early on, and it was still in them. Peter and James said, "Hey, do you want us to call down fire upon the Samaritans for rejecting Jesus' gospel?" And Jesus said no, but then they did, in a way, call down fire upon Ananias and Sapphira, but it is the only time, and you never really see that happen again, not in that same way. So that was early on in the transition from the covenant of faith, or the new covenant, into like in that transition period.
So you're saying that Acts is where we're seeing a lot of that transition happen.
Right, the book of Acts, you're seeing a lot of they're learning in real time, like
How to live in the new covenant.
how to live in the new covenant. They didn't have like a instantaneous revelation and everybody did it
Right.
the right way at the same time. They had like all of this stuff with them. And when you read Acts 15, it says some of the believers who were Pharisees were arguing for the circumcision. So, just like in natural life, how we kind of pull our own garbage into our belief system. Those were Pharisees. They were really, really about following the law. So they were looking at it and they were arguing following the law because it was Abraham. They didn't argue that Moses brought it. They argued that Abraham brought it. And then Paul and James argued that God is moving among the Gentiles regardless. So it's very much a transition. They're working it out.
And I'm sure a lot of stuff was just done out of habit still.
Yeah.
So I remember, as you probably do, leaving the Catholic Church, and all of a sudden you're like, oh, I can eat meat on Friday, and
Right.
oh, I don't have to do.
Well, how long has it been since you stopped whispering in church? Really? Do you go to the Catholic Church and whisper still?
Oh yeah,
Yeah, because that's what you do.
right. I never jump up and say, hey, wait a second.
Like, or yeah, do you raise your hand shoulder height in the Catholic Church? If they're asking like, how many here do this? You raise your hand shoulder height. You do not raise your hand above your head. That would be like rude or wrong, or just, it's just,
Well, I just
these are,
could not be Catholic. I would fail at everything.
I
I
would
know, right?
fail.
but they're cultural things of growing up Catholic, that this is what you do in Catholic Church. It just,
Yeah.
and you just know it. Okay. So, as number 10 says, the law of the new covenant is love one another as I have loved you. And that law, as Jesus has loved us, erases everything, but then gives us like one encompassing law. And Jesus emphasizes that in I think Matthew 25 or 26, when he says all the nations are gathered before him, and he separates the sheep and the goats. And he says, come into my kingdom because you saw me hungry and naked and you visited me and I was sick. And they're like, hey, when did we ever see you do that? And he says, whatever you do to the least of these, that's what you've done to me. So it's,
You're
what?
right. It is 25.
Yeah.
I just read that.
Okay. So that's the indicator that Jesus uses, like, have we loved one another as he has loved us? Is there any, I feel that we should kind of spend more time on like that end of the age, but is everybody clear on that? Like what, yeah,
I am.
okay. Was gonna go through, we can go through some things in Daniel that kind of emphasize the point of when Jesus came and when the kingdom started and that kind of thing.
I have to leave.